Hello, my dear sleepy listener. You've chosen a gentle path tonight, one that winds back through time to a land of sacred rivers, ancient wisdom, and the first great empire of the Indian subcontinent, the Maurya Empire. Before you drift away into peaceful slumber, please take a moment to like this video, leave a gentle comment about your favorite historical moment, and subscribe to keep these soothing tales coming your way. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Feel free to share your country and time zone in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let these gentle whispers of history lull you into sleep. You awaken on a cool morning in the year 322 BCE. A soft mist clings to the reeds along the Ganges River, and the sun is just beginning to spill its golden fingers across the surface of the water. Birds stir gently in the trees. Somewhere nearby, a wooden wheel creaks, turning slowly as a farmer draws water from the riverbank. You sit beside a young fig tree, listening to the hum of a world on the verge of change. The land around you is ancient. Villages scatter across the fertile plains, each with their own customs, chieftains, and gods. But recently, there's been talk, quiet murmurs through the markets, along the river paths, and inside the stone halls of courtiers, of a new force rising. A young man from humble origins who, with his brilliant teacher, has begun to challenge the fragmented kingdoms of the north. His name is Chandragupta Maurya, and no one knows quite what to make of him yet. Some say he was born of a royal line, hidden at birth. Others whisper he was the child of commoners. The stories shift like sand, shaped by the teller and the time. Even today, historians wonder whether he was of noble blood or peasant stock. The truth, as with many things, may lie somewhere between. What is certain is this: he was brilliant, fierce, and utterly determined. You first glimpse him in Takshashila, a bustling centre of learning and trade where sages, soldiers, and scribes gather. It's here that Chandragupta meets Chanakya, the scholar who would become his mentor, strategist, and guide. Chanakya, also known by the name Kautilya, is a man of deep intellect and quiet fury, recently exiled from the court of the Nanda dynasty. Together, they hatch a plan, not just to seize power, but to unify the northern lands under a single banner, to replace the corruption of the Nandas with a new order, one built on cunning, discipline, and statecraft. But tonight, you rest beneath the stars, unaware of the storms soon to gather. You hear the low hum of distant chants from a monastery. Somewhere, a bell tolls, soft and slow. Insects rise in chorus from the grass. The scent of turmeric and burnt sandalwood lingers in the air. In the years ahead, this peaceful riverbank will witness caravans, royal messengers, and maybe even war elephants passing through. But for now, the land is still. The Maurya Empire does not yet exist, and yet, as you close your eyes, you can almost feel it coming. A rustle in the wind, a change in the current, a name about to echo through history: Chandragupta. You find yourself walking beside a quiet figure in the fading light, a man wrapped in saffron robes, with sharp eyes and a mind sharper still. His name is Chanakya. Tonight. The air is thick with the scent of oil lamps and the murmuring sound of quills scratching across palm leaf manuscripts echoes softly through the open courtyard of the monastery in Takshashila. Here, under stone columns carved with delicate motifs, a new kind of war is being plotted, one not of swords and fire, but of wit, patience, and calculation. Chanakya is unlike other teachers. Where most speak in riddles or moral tales, he speaks in strategies, in costs and consequences. He believes that just rule must sometimes emerge from cunning. His eyes narrow as he sketches ideas into the dust with the stick maps. Alliances, ways to topple the mighty Nanda dynasty ruling Magadha, the richest kingdom in northern India. By his side sits Chandragupta, still young, not yet an emperor, but already glowing with ambition. You see the way he listens, absorbing every syllable. He is hungry, not just for power, but for something deeper, a sense of order, of purpose, of destiny. They are building something here, you realize, not with bricks and mortar, but with ideas, with patience, and with resolve. According to legend, Chanakya once vowed he would not tie his hair until the Nandas were destroyed, and so his locks remain loose, thick as rope, as if woven with vengeance itself. It's said he once cursed the entire Nanda line for insulting him in court, though whether this actually happened, no one can say for sure. Some stories paint him as a wronged genius, others as a schemer lurking in shadows. The truth, again, lies somewhere in the folds of time. You sit with them as they discuss alliances. The remnants of Alexander the Great's campaigns to the northwest have left cracks in the political map, gaps Chandragupta hopes to fill. There are local kings, mountain tribes, mercenaries willing to change sides. Every piece is carefully considered. Not long after, you ride quietly beside them through dense forests and dusty plains as their plan begins to unfold. Slowly, and with calculated steps, they begin their challenge to the Nanda rule. It is not easy. Magadha is a fortress of power. Its capital, Pataliputra, gleams with wealth and is guarded by a vast army. Chandragupta tries to seize it once but fails. He disappears into the wilderness, gathering more allies, learning from his mistakes. There are no roaring battles here, no cries of triumph, only the slow tightening of a net, the whispered persuasion of local rulers, the quiet shifting of loyalties, the slow erosion of fear, and eventually the Nanda dynasty falls. You don't see the final moment. It happens off stage, as many great changes do. But one morning, the banners above the palace in Pataliputra are different. The old emblems are gone. The people wake to a new name spoken in the streets. Chandragupta Maurya, the first emperor of a united northern India. Chanakya, his mentor, now serves as chief advisor. Together, they begin to forge a state unlike anything this land has seen before. Taxation systems, espionage networks, roads that cut through dense forest like careful thoughts through tangled minds. The treatise known as the Arthashastra, traditionally attributed to Chanakya, outlines rules of governance so precise. Some historians question whether it was written entirely in this period or expanded upon in later centuries. Its voice, however, remains consistent, pragmatic, sharp, and unsentimental. But you, here in the quiet halls of Pataliputra, sense something else beneath the calculation. Hope, the kind that stirs in the hearts of those who have seen chaos and long for structure, of those who have wandered and now find themselves building. As the night deepens, the halls fall silent. Outside, a soft breeze lifts the silk banners hanging from the archways. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays. You lie back on a woven mat, the stone floor cool beneath you, and close your eyes. The empire is beginning, and its roots reach deep into the minds of two men, one brilliant in thought, the other relentless in spirit. The days are longer now, and the rhythm of the land has shifted. You awaken to the sound of distant drums, not of war but of movement. Across dusty roads and narrow footpaths, banners ripple in the breeze, armies pass by, not in rage, but in quiet discipline. Horses step with soft resolve. Foot soldiers hum ancient songs beneath their breath. Something larger than conquest is taking form. It is unity. You ride beside Chandragupta Maurya, now emperor, as he surveys the lands stretching far beyond Magadha. To the northwest lie the former satrapies of Alexander the Great's fading influence. To the west, the remnants of ancient kingdoms with proud traditions. To the south, rich and independent cultures still untouched by northern rule. Chandragupta does not move with haste. He does not crave chaos. His mission is precise. You pass through Avanti, Malwa, and beyond. With each territory, alliances are formed. Resistance is met and then softened, and the map of India slowly bends toward cohesion. You sit beneath a neem tree while negotiations take place in a stone hall. There are kings who bow to power, and others who accept with pragmatism the gifts of roads, protection, and law. Some fight, and their resistance is met with calculated strength. But everywhere, the pattern holds fragments are gathered into a whole. Many centuries later, the poet Kalidasa would compare the Mauryan Empire to a mighty tree, rooted in Magadha and shading the world. And though Kalidasa's time lies far in the future, tonight, you already feel the cool shadow stretching wider. You watch young scribes in the court draw new boundaries on papyrus. The empire now stretches from the Himalayas in the north to the Deccan Plateau in the south, from the western reaches of today's Afghanistan to the shores of the Bay of Bengal. Some say Chandragupta took back territories left by Alexander's generals. Others believe these were not true conquests, but treaties wrapped in marriage and diplomacy. The sources are unclear. Did Seleucus the Pharisee, one of Alexander's successors, lose in battle to Chandragupta, or offer his daughter in marriage to ensure peace? Historians still debate the details. What is known is this: Seleucus and Chandragupta reached an agreement. A powerful one. Lands exchanged, elephants gifted, and the Maurya Empire grew even stronger. You visit new cities being built with planned roads, drains, and administrative quarters. You observe a postal system carried by swift messengers. You hear debates in assembly halls and smell the ink on scrolls filled with state policy and local taxes. There is order here, an invisible net of control. Some might call it austere, others visionary, but to the people, it brings a strange peace. The roads are safer, the markets more stable, the harvest better protected, and still, Chandragupta does not rest. At night, you see him walking alone through the gardens of Pataliputra, the capital. There's no longer a boy of dreams. He remains restless. There's a gravity to his stride, a weight behind his silence. He speaks less now and listens more. Perhaps he feels what's coming. Time does not pause for emperors. Greatness must give way to legacy. In the years ahead, the empire will stand tall, but tonight, under a sky that knows no borders, you listen to the wind through the trees and wonder, can unity last? The stars above shimmer gently. Unconcerned with thrones and maps, you lie beside a lotus pond, its water still and black, and feel the pulse of a land finally gathered under one name. Maurya, and yet, somewhere beyond the horizon, you sense the next chapter stirring. The sky over the Indus frontier feels different, opened, wide, and tinged with the scent of unfamiliar winds. You awaken inside a quiet stone pavilion near the edge of the Mauryan frontier, where the empire meets the fading echoes of a Greek world. This is a place of meetings, where sandalwood mingles with olive oil, and languages brush up against one another like waves against a jetty. The year is perhaps 305 BCE. The man before you wears robes cut in a style not native to India. His face is weathered, his beard neatly curled. He is Seleucus Nicator, one of Alexander the Great's successors. His campaign eastward had once brought Greek arms deep into Indian lands, but now the tide has turned. Seleucus stands not as a conqueror, but as a negotiator. You observe the gathering with quiet awe. The Mauryan court is not grand in opulence, but refined in structure. The air hums with a subtle power, not shouted, but deeply rooted. Guards stand watchful but still. Monks pass through archways in silent procession. The scent of jasmine drifts through the colonnades. And there stands Chandragupta, older now, his voice quieter but no less firm. Between them, a map lies unrolled on a polished wooden table. Territory lines shimmer faintly in the light of hanging lamps. Fingers trace borders, not to redraw them, but to reimagine their meaning. The details of what transpired here have faded into ambiguity over time. Some chronicles say Chandragupta marched west and won decisive battles. Others insist that Seleucus, facing pressure from other fronts, sought peace rather than war. What is known, however, is that both men gained something. Seleucus ceded lands to the west of the Indus, territories that extended the Maurya Empire even further. In return, he received 500 war elephants, creatures of immense strength and tactical value, which would later help him secure victory at the Battle of Ipsus in the Hellenistic world. And then, as legend whispers, there was a marriage alliance. Seleucus's daughter, perhaps named Helena, though we can't say for certain, is said to have joined the Mauryan court as queen. Whether this tale is true or embroidered with time's flourish is still gently questioned by historians. But the outcome is clear: diplomacy triumphed. You walk the corridors that evening past murals newly painted with scenes of cooperation, lotus blossoms offered in place of spears. The court now welcomes Greek envoys. Philosophers exchange scrolls. Languages intermingle. And somewhere in the mix, an idea of empire becomes something more than conquest. It becomes coexistence. You sit with a young court artist sketching elephants for a visiting Greek envoy. The foreign guest laughs with wonder at the sheer size of the animals, marveling at how something so large could move with such grace. You share a cup of sweet milk steeped with saffron, and for a moment the world feels smaller, less divided. In a quiet alcove, you come across a carved inscription in both Brahmi and Greek. A minor detail, perhaps, but to you, it feels profound, as if two minds from two distant lands had leaned in close and begun to whisper across time. The Mauryan Empire is now the most expansive power the Indian subcontinent has ever seen, and yet its strength lies not in its borders, but in its balance between thought and action, law and compassion, tradition and openness. Chandragupta, having achieved all this, seems at peace. You see him walking slowly along the palace garden path at dusk, hands behind his back, head slightly bowed. He does not look like a conqueror. He looks like a man quietly preparing to let go, But not yet, for now the empire thrives. The river flows, the jasmine blooms, and the scent of olives still lingers faintly in the breeze. Dawn arrives over Pataliputra with a golden hush. You awaken in the heart of the Mauryan capital, a city not just of stone and wood, but of vision. As you step through its bustling streets, you feel a pulse beneath your feet, as though the earth itself acknowledges the rhythm of empire. Pataliputra stretches along the Ganges like a jeweled ribbon. Its avenues are wide, its buildings ordered with mathematical clarity. Trees line the roads in carefully spaced rows, offering shade to travellers and traders alike. This is not a city of chaotic sprawl, it is a city of purpose. You walk past stalls spilling with goods, baskets of bright turmeric and deep green cardamom, ivory combs and copper ornaments, scrolls filled with lore and poetry. The language of the empire is not just policy, it is prosperity. People from distant lands mingle here. Persians, Greeks, Central Asians. Their faces carry stories, their hands carry wares. You arrive at the heart of the capital, the royal palace. Built of timber but raised with elegance, it sits like a lotus upon the land, expansive, airy, filled with carved balconies and echoing halls. Its splendor would one day be described by Megasthenes, a Greek ambassador who lived here during the reign of Chandragupta's son. He called it rival to anything he had seen in Persia or beyond. Pillars gleamed with gold, fountains shimmered under ceiling murals, but even Megasthenes' accounts, coloured by awe, leave room for skepticism. Some scholars question if the grandeur he recorded was exaggerated, perhaps misunderstood through cultural lenses. Still, here and now, the palace breathes with quiet energy. You watch ministers pass with scrolls bound in silk. Artisans work on frescoes of flowering vines. In the courtyards, children of noble families study under the guidance of monks, learning Dharma, diplomacy, and the art of silence. The Maurya administration is vast. Provinces are divided and governed with rigor. There are spies, it is said, planted like seeds throughout the land, reporting not to punish, but to observe, to keep balance. Tonight, you share a meal with a tax collector. He tells you of the records he keeps, the granaries he monitors, the seasonal patterns of rice and wheat. His job is not glamorous, but he speaks with pride. He serves the empire that watches over its own. And in the centre of it all is Pataliputra, a city where policy becomes daily life, where structure becomes serenity. You walk to the edge of the city walls, where a quiet platform overlooks the Ganges. The river flows on, steady and ageless. Below, women wash clothes and sing softly. A child tosses pebbles into the shallows. The empire expands, but here it also settles, it roots, it breathes. And yet, not all voices within these walls speak with joy. In the darker corners of the city, the weight of control is sometimes felt as a burden. Not everyone benefits equally. A farmer's harvest may falter. A merchant may struggle with ever-shifting tariffs. A poet may find his words too closely watched. The machinery of empire hums with efficiency, but like all great machines, it is not without friction. Still, there is a sense, as night begins to fall, that something remarkable has been built here. That in this grand experiment of rule and reason, a vision of unity has taken root. You sit once more beneath a broad-leaved banyan tree as fireflies drift through the air like living lanterns. The sound of drums reaches you from a distant festival. Children's laughter echoes between the stone walls of houses that stretch toward the river. Pataliputra sleeps soundly tonight, and you, wrapped in the hush of empire, drift gently into rest. The seasons have turned. You awaken not in a palace, but in the cool shade of a sparse forest in southern India. The air here is quiet, broken only by the sound of birds and the rustle of wind in tall grasses. Before you, beneath a modest canopy of woven leaves, sits a man once called Emperor, now simply a seeker. It is Chandragupta. His hair is thinner, his face more lined. The commanding stride of his youth has softened into a deliberate stillness. He wears no ornaments, no silks, only the simple white robes of a Jain ascetic. You're in Shravanabalagola, a hill town nestled between granite outcrops. The rocks here are ancient, weathered by rain and time. Pilgrims move barefoot across the warm stone paths, their voices low, their gaze inward. It was after years of rule, perhaps 2 decades or more, that Chandragupta stepped away from his throne. Some say it was the influence of Jain monk Bhadrabahu that moved him. Others whisper that the burden of a rule, or perhaps a natural yearning for stillness, led him to renounce power. Historians are unsure of the exact reasons. Some records are vague, others contradictory. What is clear, however, is that he chose to leave behind one of the most powerful thrones in the ancient world, to live not as ruler, but as disciple. You follow him as he walks barefoot over the stone terrain. He carries no possessions. His meals are simple, his voice rarely raised. He fasts often, not out of show, but as a form of release, a deep unburdening of worldly ties. In the mornings, he sits in silent meditation. At dusk, he reads from sacred Jain texts. Other monks join him, and in their quiet rhythm, you sense something both humble and immense, a kind of peace that does not come from conquest, but from surrender. In the monsoon season, rain falls softly over the shrine hill. You take shelter beneath a rock ledge and watch the droplets trace tiny rivers along the stone. Chandragupta remains seated in meditation, undisturbed, even as the water pools around him. This final chapter of his life ends, as the Jain tradition teaches, not with glory, but with detachment. Some sources say he practiced salakana, the ritual of voluntary peaceful death through fasting. The practice is seen not as suicide, but as the ultimate spiritual discipline, a slow, mindful departure from the body. You don't witness the exact moment. It passes like a gentle sigh. One morning, he does not rise from his seat. The birds continue to sing, the trees sway gently, and somewhere, perhaps in the heart of the empire he once ruled, a breeze carries his memory north. You travel once more to Pataliputra, where the court has already shifted. A new king, Bindusara, Chandragupta's son, now wears the mantle of power. There is continuity, but also change. Bindusara is less ascetic, more administrative. He will rule with steadiness, expanding the empire further south. But tonight, the stars over Shravanabelagola shine just a little brighter, and as you rest near the ancient stone hills, you realize Chandragupta's greatest journey was not outward, but inward. From a boy of ambition to an emperor of India, from a ruler of men to a seeker of peace, and now, beneath the eternal sky, he sleeps. You awaken to a gentle hum of order, not the rousing surge of conquest, but the steady beat of administration. Bindusara now sits on the Mauryan throne, the second emperor of the dynasty, and the son of Chandragupta. you find yourself in a quieter time, a period where expansion continues, but the tools of power are less about force and more about structure, diplomacy, and consolidation. The court in Pataliputra has changed, ever so subtly. The air is less charged with the fervour of founding an empire and more with the calm of preserving one. You walk among scribes who record not battles, but grain tallies and judicial rulings. You sit beside royal secretaries who debate land taxes and administrative reforms over scrolls and inkstones. Bindusara's name means one who brings strength, and his rule lives up to that promise, not through spectacle, but through resilience. His reign extends Mauryan control further south, into the Deccan, touching the borders of what we now call Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. The Nandas had never managed this kind of southern reach, but Bindusara, with the foundation laid by his father and the guidance of seasoned ministers, manages to bring even these regions into the imperial fold, not all through war, often through skilled negotiation, tribute agreements, and administrative placement. And yet, records of his reign are curiously thin. The details blur. Some inscriptions speak of his titles, Amitrahata, the slayer of foes, while others suggest a much more bureaucratic figure, efficient and aloof. Historians puzzle over this silence. Why is there so little known of a man who ruled for over 2 decades? Perhaps the calmness of his rule simply left less for chroniclers to embellish. You overhear discussions between visiting scholars. Some wonder whether Bindusara followed Jainism like his father, or the Vedic traditions, or even leaned toward early forms of Ajivika thought, a now extinct philosophical school. The truth remains uncertain, as do many aspects of his personality. He is a figure glimpsed only in profile, never directly illuminated, but the results of his leadership are felt everywhere. The Mauryan Empire continues to hum with organization. Roads stretch farther. Provincial governors, often members of the royal family or trusted allies, oversee cities with a remarkable degree of autonomy, yet stay closely tied to the central command of Pataliputra. You walk through a city newly incorporated into the empire, Ujjain. The sun rises over its riverbanks as traders unload cloth, sandalwood, and salt. A local ruler, once proud and resistant, now wears the simple sash of a Mauryan vassal. He governs his people, but he sends reports to the capital. He bows to Pataliputra's distant gaze. Bindusara, you're told, maintained a robust diplomatic network. Greek sources speak of a correspondence between the Mauryan court and Antiochus I of the Seleucid Empire. One letter requests sweet wine, dried figs, and a Greek philosopher. It's delightful human detail, an emperor of India curious about distant flavours and thoughts. You smile at the image, a powerful king with a taste for figs. As evening falls, you sit with a group of travelling monks in the courtyard of a temple lit by oil lamps. They speak of law and balance, of dharma and duty. There's no rush in their speech, no heat in their words. You realize this is how the empire sustains itself, not through constant upheaval, but through rhythm, through the predictable movements of officials, priests, farmers, and families. But beneath this calm, you feel something else stirring. In Bindusara's court, a young man has begun to attract attention. One of his many sons, intelligent, passionate, fierce when necessary, but also capable of deep reflection. His name is Ashoka. For now, he is a provincial governor, perhaps in Ujjain, perhaps in Taxila. The sources conflict, but wherever he is watching, learning, waiting. And the world does not yet know what this prince will become. You lie beneath a canopy of stars as owls call gently in the distance. The empire is at its height, serene and ordered, but empires, like people, change with time, and soon a storm of transformation will rise from within. You awaken to the sound of foreign voices echoing down marble corridors. Inside the heart of Pataliputra, you're no longer surrounded only by the rhythms of Sanskrit and Prakrit, but by Greek, Aramaic, and a dozen dialects from across Asia. Diplomats walk the shaded walkways, their sandals tapping softly against stone. Scholars carry scrolls wrapped in linen. Artists sketch elephants and banyan trees for foreign guests with wide eyes and curious minds. Among these visitors is a man named Megasthenes, a Greek envoy from the Seleucid Empire. He's arrived at the court of Bindusara, or possibly at the tail end of Chandragupta's reign, and has begun to document what he sees with a mix of admiration, confusion, and the occasional fanciful embellishment. You walk quietly behind him as he peers into the workings of the Mauryan court, his quill scribbling hastily into his parchment notebooks. He writes of the sprawling capital of Pataliputra, likening it to cities of Persia and Babylon. He marvels at the wooden palaces, the fortified walls, the gardens filled with peacocks and mango trees. He describes a society of rigid castes, where everything has its place and function. Yet even as you listen to his observations, you sense that something is off, just slightly. His descriptions don't always match what you see. He misunderstands certain customs, misinterprets rituals, confuses beliefs. He writes of people who never lie, of philosopher kings who fast for weeks, and of guards who never sleep. Later generations of historians would puzzle over Megasthenes' accounts, recorded in a now-lost book called Indica. Only fragments survive, quoted by later Greek authors. Was he idealizing the Mauryan world misled by translators, or perhaps blending fact and fantasy in the way travelers often do? Still, his writings preserve invaluable details. He notes how the empire is governed with ministers chosen by merit, with cities planned like chessboards, with spies who dress as monks to listen in temples and taverns. He notes the cleanliness of the people, their regular bathing, their reverence for truth. You smile as you overhear him marvel at the Indian practice of using coins with precise weights, a detail both mundane and profound. He is captivated not by spectacle, but by the quiet efficiency of a civilization in motion. Megasthenes dines with officials, often vegetarian meals, and learns of beliefs that baffle him: rebirth, karma, the cyclical nature of time. You watch his brow furrow as he tries to grasp these concepts, shaped so differently from the linear tales of Greek myth. In the evenings, you follow him to a guest house by the Ganges. He writes late into the night, candle flickering. He pauses often, staring at the moon's reflection in the river. You wonder if he realizes what he's preserving and how much he's distorting, unintentionally. Meanwhile, the empire continues on, steady and unhurried. In the shadow of the court, young Ashoka, son of Bindusara, continues to grow in reputation. You hear his name whispered in markets and among soldiers. They speak of a man with piercing eyes, a sharp tongue, and a will that bends others to his purpose. He has governed cities, quelled uprisings. He is not yet emperor, but already he commands attention. Some say he is too severe. Others, that he carries within him a storm of purpose, and Megasthenes, he returns west, eventually. His writings will drift through libraries and scroll houses, shaping how distant lands understand the Indian world, even when they misunderstand it. But tonight, you sit on a quiet veranda as the river flows gently past. A lone heron stands on one leg in the shallows. The stars above blink softly, ancient and indifferent. In this place where east meets west, where myths intertwine with fact, you close your eyes and rest. The empire breathes quietly around you, still vast, still balanced, still full of voices. The winds shift. You awaken not in a palace, nor in a marketplace, but in a garrison town, a place where road meets fort, where command meets unrest. This is Taxila, a city of crossroads and tension, perched near the northwestern edge of the empire, and it is here that a young governor named Ashoka walks the stone ramparts, eyes fixed on the horizon. He is not yet emperor, not yet the figure who will reshape the soul of the Mauryan Empire. Here he is simply a prince, one of many sons of Bindusara, but there is something unmistakable about him, a weight, a quiet intensity. His orders are clear, his gaze unwavering. Soldiers stand a little straighter when he passes. Ashoka has been sent here for a reason. Taxila, despite its sophistication, has seen rebellion twice. According to the records, the city rose in revolt against imperial authority. The reasons remain hazy, perhaps discontent with local officials, perhaps the pressure of overreach. But the message was clear. The outer provinces, though vital, are not always content. And so Ashoka was sent not just to govern, but to restore order. You observe him during a morning audience. A local merchant brings complaints of taxes, a farmer of bandits. Ashoka listens, not with softness, but with efficiency. He dispenses justice swiftly. His voice is calm, but final. You sense no joy in it, only necessity. Later, walking through the quiet streets of the city, you see evidence of his policies. Patrols are more frequent, roads more secure. The bazaars, once tense, begin to bustle again. The city breathes more easily, though under the watchful eye of its young governor. And yet, in quieter moments, you catch glimpses of something else beneath his stern exterior. In a secluded garden near the edge of town, Ashoka sits with a wandering monk. They speak of suffering, of war, of the weight of rule. The monk tells a story of impermanence, of how even the mightiest stone will return to dust. Ashoka says nothing, but his eyes narrow. He is listening, deeply. Back in Pataliputra, the court is shifting. Bindusara is aging, and the question of succession stirs beneath the surface. Ashoka is not the eldest son, and not the favourite. There are rumours of rivalries, of political manoeuvring. Some chronicles, particularly Buddhist ones, speak of conflict, even of bloodshed among brothers. But the details are cloaked in time's murkiness. Historians disagree. Did Ashoka seize power through violence? Was he exiled and then recalled during a crisis? Was he ruthless in rising, only to later change? The answers, like the truth of all empires, are layered. What is certain is this: Ashoka's time is coming. You walk with him along the edge of a quiet river one evening. He is alone, save for a hawk circling above. He pauses by the water, his reflection rippling in the current. He is a man being forged by conflict, by duty, by solitude. The Ashoka who will one day renounce violence and carve his beliefs into stone pillars for the world to read is not yet here, but the seeds are being planted here, in Taxila, in hardship, in thought. You return to your bedroll near the walls of the garrison. The wind carries the scent of cedar and dust. Somewhere, a dog barks. A woman sings a lullaby to a restless child. You close your eyes. In the distance, the fire of transformation flickers to life. You awaken to the sound of distant cries, not of celebration, but of something raw, something wounded. You are no longer in Taxila. The air here is thicker, heavier. The soil underfoot is stained a darker red. You stand at the battlefield of Kalinga. The year is around 261 BCE. The Mauryan Empire has reached the height of its territorial reach. Under Ashoka, now emperor, it stretches from the Himalayas to the southern edge of the subcontinent, from the Afghan hills to the Bay of Bengal, and yet it is here, in Kalinga, a fiercely independent kingdom near the eastern coast, that Ashoka faces his greatest trial. The war has just ended. You walk slowly through a silent valley scattered with the remains of combat. Ashes drift on the wind. Abandoned chariots lie broken. A sandal lies half buried in the mud. And though the fighting has stopped, the echoes remain. The edicts of Ashoka, stone inscriptions left by the emperor himself, would later tell of what happened here. Over 100,000 people killed, even more displaced. Entire villages turned to dust, a land scarred. Ashoka stands not in triumph, but in devastation. You see him standing on a ridge, his shoulders heavy. His sword hangs limp at his side. He does not smile. He does not speak. This was the moment, the turning point. According to legend and his own records, Ashoka looked upon the carnage, and something within him broke. A chasm opened where conquest had once filled him with pride. He saw mothers wailing for sons. He saw the empty gazes of orphaned children, and he saw his own reflection in the blood. The transformation was not immediate, but it began here, in silence, in stillness, in shame. You walk beside him through the ruins of a village, the air thick with smoke and grief. He does not give orders. He listens. He watches. He begins to understand, not just the cost of war, but the meaning of compassion. Soon after, Ashoka renounces further violence. He embraces the teachings of the Buddha, not out of ceremony, but from something deeper, personal, unshakable. Historians sometimes debate the nature of this conversion. Was it a public gesture to secure peace, a political strategy, or a genuine spiritual awakening? The records vary. Some suggest Ashoka had already been exposed to Buddhism years earlier. Others believe Kalinga was the catalyst, but none deny its effect. He begins to refer to himself not just as king, but as Devanampriya, beloved of the gods. From that point onward, the nature of the Mauryan Empire begins to shift. You witness it first in the language of his decrees. No longer filled with threats or demands, they urge kindness, tolerance, respect. Ashoka speaks of all religions as deserving of dignity. He calls for fair treatment of prisoners. He forbids needless slaughter of animals. He creates a new position, the Dhamma Mahamatras, officers tasked not with collecting taxes or suppressing rebellion, but with spreading moral values and ensuring the welfare of his subjects. You pass one such inscription being carved into stone. The sound of hammer and chisel echoes through a clearing. Each word is deliberate, permanent, left for generations not yet born. One edict reads, The victory of Dharma is the only true victory. Ashoka is no longer building just an empire of land. He is building an empire of the mind. And yet, the shadows of Kalinga remain. They never fully leave him. You see it in the way he pauses by the riverbank at dusk, gazing at the water in silence. You sense it in the tone of his later writings, humble, uncertain, always striving for better, because even peace, he learns, must be practiced daily. Tonight, you lie beside a stupa under construction, its dome half formed against the moonlit sky. Monks chant softly nearby, their voices carried on the wind like a balm over wounded earth. Ashoka sleeps within a nearby tent, not surrounded by generals, but by scholars and healers, and you, too. Rest, held in the breath between sorrow and renewal. You awaken to the rhythmic sweep of brooms in temple courtyards, the low chant of monks beneath Bodhi trees, and the quiet footsteps of messengers spreading not orders of war but invitations to peace. This is the age of Ashoka the Arma king. The sun rises gently over Pataliputra, not on the clangor of armor or the blare of royal horns, but on the calm glow of transformation. You sense it in the architecture, in the music of the streets, in the softened posture of even the sternest palace guards. The emperor has changed, and the empire is beginning to change with him. You now walk beside Ashoka not as a commander, not even as a ruler, but as a servant of the Dharma, a word not easily translated. It means truth, virtue, moral law, compassion, all braided together into a path. You watch as Ashoka begins to reframe the role of kingship. No longer the supreme warrior, he calls himself the father of his people, tasked not with domination, but with nurturing. He tells his ministers that his greatest concern is not wealth or conquest, but the happiness of all beings, human and animal alike. In one of his most famous edicts, you read, "All men are my children. What I desire for my own children, I desire for all men." You follow him through the empire as he visits towns and villages, not in a chariot of gold, but on foot, pausing often to speak with the poor, the sick, the elderly. He listens to their concerns. He tells his officials to report not just on crops and taxes, but on how people feel. Are they afraid? Are they well? Do they live in peace? It is a reign unlike any the subcontinent has seen. You observe the work of the Dhamma Mahamatras, the emperor's moral emissaries travelling across the land. They do not collect dues or levy punishments. They inspect hospitals. They check on prisoners. They ensure animals are treated kindly and elders are respected. They are state agents, not of control, but of care. You stand at the port of Tamralipta, watching ships depart for Lanka, each one carrying monks, gifts, and teachings. Ashoka has begun to send Buddhist missions abroad, spreading not just a religion, but a message of peace. One of his sons, Mahinda, will journey to Sri Lanka, where a quiet seed will be planted, growing into a spiritual legacy that lasts even to this day. And yet, Ashoka does not demand conversion. In fact, he urges religious tolerance. In his 12th major rock edict, you read his plea for understanding among faiths one should honor all religions. Restraint in speech is best. The empire becomes a mosaic of beliefs. Brahmins perform rituals. Jains continue their ascetic paths. Buddhist monks walk barefoot from village to village, and the state protects them all. But not everyone is convinced. You overhear merchants in the market whispering that Ashoka has become too soft. Some regional governors resist the changes. Military commanders wonder whether discipline can survive in an empire where even hunting is discouraged. And historians, centuries later, will puzzle over this paradox. Can a vast empire truly function on compassion alone? Did Ashoka's ideals weaken the Mauryan structure that Chandragupta and Chanakya had so carefully built? Or did they elevate it to something far more enduring? The answers, as always, remain open. Tonight, you sit beneath a pillar freshly carved with one of Ashoka's edicts. It stands tall, polished and precise, its words spiraling around its length in the Brahmi script. A lion stands atop it, silent and still, its gaze stretching toward eternity. The stars emerge, one by one, like gentle nods of approval. Ashoka rests nearby in a modest chamber, his walls bare, save for a single painting of a lotus in bloom. He does not need opulence. His kingdom lies not only on maps but in minds, in memories, in hearts. You lie back on the cool stone floor, the pillar casting a long, protective shadow across your feet. The empire is different now, not just stronger, not just larger, but in some quiet way, kinder. You awaken to the tap, tap, tap of chisels striking stone. In a quiet clearing beneath a cloudless sky, artisans work steadily at the base of a tall pillar. The air is dry, warm, filled with the smell of fresh earth and stone dust. Nearby, a scribe reads slowly from a parchment as the craftsmen carve each syllable into permanence. These are not the boasts of a king or declarations of war. They are words of wisdom, of humility, of care. You're watching the creation of an Ashokan edict. These pillars rise across the empire tall, smooth, and capped with regal lions or bulls, each one a silent voice speaking across centuries. Carved in the local languages of the land, they carry Ashoka's messages of peace, compassion, and moral reflection to people of every caste and creed. One reads, "Let all listen and be comforted." Another, "There is no gift like the gift of the Dharma." You trace your fingers along the newly carved script, feeling the depth of each groove. These words are not hurried. They are placed with care, with purpose. They are intended not just to instruct, but to last. You journey with the stonemasons as they travel to new provinces, in the foothills of the Himalayas, in the dry plains of Gujarat, even into the deep forests near the Vindhya range. Everywhere, a new pillar rises quiet but resolute. Some are simple declarations, others more poetic. One speaks of Ashoka's deep regret for the suffering caused during the Kalinga War. Even 100th or 1,000th part of those who were killed or died or were separated from their loved ones is now considered very grievous by Devanampriya. Historians today marvel at this, an emperor of such power expressing remorse, not triumph. The edicts are unparalleled in their tone, not commands but confessions, not mandates but meditations, and yet the reach of Ashoka's message goes beyond India. You follow a caravan travelling west, its wagons laden with gifts, scrolls, and golden statues. These are emissaries of Ashoka's Dharma, sent to foreign courts in Syria, Egypt, Greece, and beyond. His 13th major rock edict claims that kings as distant as Antiochus, Ptolemy, Antigonus, and Magus received his messengers. Whether these missions truly arrived, or how they were received, is a point of debate. Some scholars question the extent of Ashoka's influence abroad. Were these contacts symbolic or substantial? Did these foreign kings acknowledge Ashoka's teachings? The records are unclear, and silence, as always, leaves room for wonder. But the intent is undeniable. Ashoka is not building walls, he is building bridges. Even within the empire, you observe how the edicts begin to affect everyday life. Slaughter of animals for food is restricted on certain days. Medicinal herbs and shade trees are planted along roads. Wells are dug. Rest houses built. Officials are assigned not just to rule, but to care. You visit a small village where a new clinic has opened. An old woman tells you she's receiving eye treatments once reserved for nobles. A shepherd smiles as he shares news that the king has pardoned his brother from harsh punishment, citing mercy as a guiding principle. You walk back through the countryside in the evening light, passing another pillar, this one nestled beside a mango grove. A group of children plays near its base, chasing each other between the vines. They don't yet know what's written on the stone above them, but they live beneath its shade. Ashoka no longer sees power as something to grasp, but as something to hold gently, like water cupped in the hands. The pillars, like his reign, are grounded and reaching at once. Tonight, you sit beneath one of these sentinels, watching the moonlight touch the lion's carved mane. The words below it shimmer faintly in the soft light, their meaning still unfolding across time, and you, wrapped in the hush of an empire trying to speak kindly to its people, breathe in the stillness of moral ambition carved into stone. You awaken to the rhythmic sweep of robes brushing against stone. The morning air is thick with incense and the soft murmur of recited prayers. You're seated in the outer courtyard of a Buddhist monastery, newly built and humming with quiet life. Monks move through the shadows, barefoot and gentle, carrying bowls for alms, scrolls for study, and messages destined for distant shores. Ashoka's empire is no longer growing in land, it is expanding in spirit. You join a group of travelers as they prepare to cross the great sea. These are not merchants or soldiers, they are missionaries, chosen by the emperor himself. Among them is Mahinda, Ashoka's own son, a serene and thoughtful man with eyes that seem to look beyond the horizon. Their destination, Lanka, the island to the south, modern-day Sri Lanka, is a land of kings and ancient traditions. For Ashoka, it is the next step in his quest to share the Dharma. He believes the message of compassion, discipline, and right conduct should know no boundaries. You board the small vessel with them, sails flapping gently in the wind, and watch as the coastline of India fades into the mist. The sea is calm, the sky soft with cloud. Mahinda recites verses of the Dhammapada in a low voice, almost like a lullaby. Upon arrival, the island welcomes them with curiosity. The king of Lanka, Devanampiya greets Mahinda with deference, and soon after converts to Buddhism himself, or so the chronicles say. The stories are vivid, passed down through centuries, a talking deer, a test of wisdom, a sacred tree brought from India, planted with reverence. You watch as a sapling of the Bodhi tree, under which the Buddha is said to have attained enlightenment, is carried to Lanka by Ashoka's daughter, Sangamita. This tree, still growing today in Anuradhapura, becomes more than a symbol. It becomes a living link between two nations, between two dreams. Back in the Indian mainland, the missionary effort doesn't stop. Ashoka sends envoys to the Hellenistic world, to Southeast Asia, perhaps even as far as the Middle East. The records are fragmentary, their journeys hidden by time, but the ambition is clear. Never before has an emperor attempted a spiritual project so vast in scope, yet so peaceful in nature. You visit a quiet port city where a group of monks prepares to leave for Suvarnabhumi, the land of gold, perhaps somewhere in modern Thailand or Myanmar. The journey will be long, filled with risk, but they carry little fear, only scrolls and faith. At home, Ashoka builds new monasteries and stupas. He commissions the preservation of Buddhist texts. He convenes the Third Buddhist Council in Pataliputra to refine the teachings and dispel division among the monks. Some say it was an act of purification. Others see it as Ashoka's attempt to unify the faith before spreading it further. You walk through a great hall lit with butter lamps, where monks debate doctrine in hushed voices. The air feels ancient, yet alive. And yet, the empire is not all harmony. There are murmurs. Some Brahmins feel alienated. Some generals, once central to statecraft, now feel peripheral. Ashoka's turn towards spiritual rule has brought both light and shadow. The balance between governance and guidance is delicate, and the empire, vast as it is, cannot please all. But Ashoka does not turn back. In a rock edict near the western frontier, you read, "He who honours his own religion and condemns others harms his own religion more than he helps it." It is not just tolerance, it is wisdom. You sit one evening in the shade of a great stupa in Sanchi, watching pilgrims circle it clockwise, their hands pressed in prayer. Birds nest in the crevices of the stone dome. The wind plays with the prayer flags strung across its entryway. You imagine these same prayers being whispered in Lanka, in Gandhara, in cities far beyond what you can see. The sun begins to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land. Ashoka, now older, spends more time with monks than ministers. He does not boast of his empire's borders. He measures success in peace, in virtue, in the silence that follows a good teaching. And as you rest on the cool grass beside the stupa, you realize this is not an emperor who spread a religion. This is an emperor who planted a way of life. You awaken to the sound of slow footsteps on polished stone. The emperor is walking again, not to inspect fortresses or oversee roads, but simply to move, to reflect, to feel the ground beneath his feet. Ashoka is older now. His once dark hair has thinned and silvered. His eyes are heavier, softer. The fire of youth has not vanished, but it flickers differently now, not as a torch for conquest, but as a small lamp of inward light. You follow him as he moves through the gardens of Pataliputra. The city still hums with life, but the imperial palace has grown quieter. The rooms that once echoed with diplomatic discussions and military reports now hold scriptures, stone tablets, and the occasional quiet laughter of grandchildren. Ashoka's days are shorter now. He eats little, he writes often, or rather, dictates, his words carefully measured as he considers his final instructions. Not for glory, not for gold, but for the soul of the realm. You see him pausing beside a stone pillar, one of his own, carved decades earlier. His fingers trace the grooves of its message. Perhaps he's rereading his own words. Only by respecting all religions can one's own religion truly be understood. Or perhaps he's simply remembering who he was when these words were first spoken. But even amid the peace of his later reign, sorrow finds its way to him. Ashoka, for all his wisdom, has known grief, and it clings to him now like the weight of a damp robe. Some say he lost his beloved queen, Asandimitra, around this time. She had been his companion for much of his journey, thoughtful, graceful, a quiet supporter of his spiritual path. Her absence leaves a hollow space at his side. Others whisper of his estranged relationships with some of his sons. The royal family, once a firm foundation, now drifts like leaves in a current. Sanghamitta, his daughter, remains devoted, her journey to Lanka etched in the emperor's heart as a source of pride and connection. But elsewhere ambitions stir. One of his sons, Kunala, once favoured for succession, was blinded. Whether by a cruel plot or tragic accident remains debated. The records are fragmented. The sorrow, however, is not. You glimpse Ashoka in his chamber one night, kneeling before a small altar, no guards, no advisors, just a bowl of flickering oil, a few fresh flowers, and the silence of a man who has given all he can give. He murmurs a verse from the Dhammapada. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. He does not flinch from pain. He allows it to wash over him, like the river washes its banks, like time smooths the hardest stone. And yet, despite the sorrow, the empire still moves, the people still work, plant, pray, the teachings still spread. But you notice a change in the capital. The once vibrant court begins to lose its clarity. Ministers argue, provincial reports slow. Corruption whispers in the gaps left by an aging emperor's retreat from governance. Ashoka, it seems, has given his heart to the world, but the world, being what it is, does not always return the favour. And still, he walks the gardens, he watches the sun rise over the Ganges. He listens to monks recite verses by moonlight. He writes one final edict, carved in a far-off corner of the empire, meant not for generals or governors, but for future kings. It ends with a plea, may my sons and grandsons not think it enough to continue my work. Let them do better. A whisper across time, a father speaking to the unborn. Tonight, you sit beside a lantern in the outer gardens. The air smells of jasmine and wood smoke. A servant walks quietly past, carrying a tray of warm milk. Somewhere, a bell tolls the passing of another day. Ashoka sleeps in a modest room. No throne, no crown. Only the gentle embrace of a life lived fully, in power, in pain, in peace. And you, resting under the stars that have watched empires rise and fall, feel something rare, stillness that holds meaning. You awaken in a chamber that feels both grand and hollow. The corridors of Pataliputra still stretch long and elegant, their walls smooth, their carvings intact. But the hush that fills them now is different, not contemplative, not peaceful, but empty. Something has shifted. Ashoka is gone. There is no fanfare in the air, no bells, no mass ceremony, only a soft, quiet understanding among those who served him an era has ended. The emperor who once ruled almost the entirety of the subcontinent now belongs to history. His teachings, engraved in stone, remain. His reforms, once radical, continue to ripple. But his presence, the moral centre of the Mauryan world, has faded like incense on the wind, and with it, the empire begins to drift. You walk past the court ministers, their voices louder now, tinged with urgency and uncertainty. There is no agreed-upon successor to match Ashoka's stature. His many sons, his extended royal family, all capable in different ways, begin to jostle for position. Governance, once unified under dharma and discipline, begins to fracture. This is not collapse, not yet. It is a soft unraveling. You travel to provincial capitals where governors once ruled with Ashoka's edicts pinned above their courts. Now, you see some of those pillars covered in vines. Others stand chipped, weathered, ignored. The bureaucracy, once efficient and widespread, slows. Officials are reassigned. Local rulers, once submissive, begin to act with greater independence. In some corners of the empire, the teachings of Ashoka are dismissed as too gentle. New administrators prioritize tribute, not tolerance. Armies, neglected during decades of non-violence, begin to rust, both literally and spiritually. You pass through a town where the roads are still straight and shaded, where rest houses still stand, but something feels different. The people walk more quickly, eyes lower. Merchants grumble about new tariffs. Monks sit quietly, unsure of their role under shifting political winds. In the capital, statues of Ashoka remain, but they are no longer bowed to. They are background now, not center, and yet the infrastructure of empire holds. For a time, the Mauryan system had been vast and resilient, a skeleton of stone, law, and tradition. Roads still connect distant regions. Tax systems still function. Trade continues along the Grand Trunk Road, stretching from Bengal to the Indies. You see caravans of spices, textiles, precious gems, reminders that the Mauryan heart still beats, but it beats less steadily. In the absence of a single unifying figure like Ashoka, regional divisions grow. You hear murmurs of rebellion in the western provinces, of insubordination in the south, of discontent among Brahmins, whose status was altered under Ashoka's Buddhist-influenced policies. Now, they seek to reclaim religious authority and political voice. Scholars debate whether the decline began with Ashoka's death or had been seeded earlier. Some suggest his emphasis on moral rule, while noble weakened the state's grip. Others argue the empire was simply too vast, too diverse to remain centralized indefinitely. Even in his lifetime, the cracks had formed, but now, without his presence to mend them, the cracks begin to widen. You sit one evening on the steps of a temple that once hosted royal envoys. It is still beautiful. Carvings of lions and lotuses still line its pillars, but weeds grow between the flagstones, and the lamps are fewer. A boy brings water to an elder monk, and you hear them speak, softly, of better days, not gone, just passing. A kind of quiet grief settles over the land, not for a lost king, but for a lost rhythm, the unique harmony between governance and goodness, between strength and stillness, is slipping away. And yet, as you lie down beside the old city walls, still warm from the day's sun, you sense that not all is fading. Some things endure, the pillars still stand, the Dharma still echoes, the people, though weary, still remember, and in that memory, perhaps, the spirit of Ashoka lingers. You awaken to the sound of wheels turning, not royal chariots, not the rumble of armies, but carts, oxen drawn, laden with silks and spices, ivory and indigo, heading steadily down the Grand Trunk Road. These are the new arteries of the Mauryan Empire, still pulsing, still alive, even as the empire itself grows quieter. You stand at a bustling crossroads somewhere in eastern India. The sun is high, and the scent of cumin and oil rises from food stalls nearby. Merchants shout prices, travellers rest in shaded courtyards. Buddhist monks pass with bowls in hand. The empire still connects, still holds. Trade flourishes, even as the imperial court begins to lose its grip on distant provinces. You follow the merchants westward, toward Taxila and beyond, watching how goods pass smoothly across territories, cotton from the Ganges, gems from southern mines, horses from Central Asia. There are traders from Bactria, from Persia, even a few with Greek features and accents, remnants of Alexander's forgotten footprint. Coins bearing Mauryan seals still carry value. Ashoka's edicts, though worn, still mark the wayside at rest stops. Commerce, it seems, does not sleep. And in many ways, it is trade that sustains the empire through this uncertain twilight. You arrive in Baruch, a port on the western coast, where ships from the Arabian Sea unload amphorae and fine cloth. Spices are weighed and counted with the same precision that once governed royal policy. The portmaster still records names and goods, his ink dark and meticulous. Here, the Mauryan world still feels whole. But beneath the bustle, you notice the subtle signs of decay. Bribes are more common now, a coin slipped for faster loading, a quiet favour asked in exchange for a permit. Once rare, such transactions are now routine. The efficiency that once defined the Mauryan administration has dulled, not broken, but blunted. You hear murmurs of provincial governors appointing relatives, ignoring imperial decrees, altering records, and yet the people adapt, as they always do. You meet a family of artisans in a village near the Narmada River. They craft exquisite pottery, etched with delicate patterns passed down for generations. Their work is sold far and wide. When asked about the empire, the potter shrugs gently. The tax collector still comes, he says, so we still work. It is not loyalty or love that sustains the Mauryan order now. It is habit, a structure too large to collapse in a single breath, a routine too deeply rooted to vanish overnight. Even the spiritual currents remain strong. Buddhist monasteries continue to grow in number and influence. You spend time at a quiet vihara nestled in the hills of modern-day Odisha, where young novices memorize sutras under flickering lamps. Pilgrims arrive from far away, Lanka, Burma, and even China in the decades to come. Ashoka's legacy, though no longer central in court, lives on in stone, in story, and in the movement of feet across sacred ground. But you also see changes. Brahmanical traditions, once subdued under Ashoka's reforms, begin to reassert themselves. In temples near Ujjain, Vedic rituals grow louder. Sanskrit, which had taken a quieter role under Buddhist influence, now resurfaces in liturgy and law. The pendulum swings slowly back. You pass through one city where a governor has commissioned new public works, not in the name of Dharma, but of lineage and local pride. Statues bear his name, not the emperor's. The centre is weakening, and in its absence the edges begin to claim their own authority. The Mauryan Empire still stands. But the idea of a single, unified, moral empire, that idea flickers like a candle nearing its end. That evening, you rest in a roadside guest house built long ago by imperial decree. The walls are worn but solid, the roof, patched, still holds. A traveller beside you plays a reed flute. Another roasts lentils over a low fire. You share stories of distant cities, of routes still open and roads now overgrown. And you realize the empire may be fading, but the people endure. They build, they sing, they carry forward, not under banners, but beneath stars. You lie down on a woven mat as the wind carries the scent of the rain from the hills. Outside, the road stretches endlessly west and east, a vein of memory etched across the land, and in your heart you feel it still moving, not as power, but as presence. You awaken beneath the slanted thatch of a quiet village hut, far from the stone towers of Pataliputra, far from the pillars and courts that once defined an empire. Roosters call in the distance. A clay oven crackles as flatbread is warmed for the morning meal. Outside, fields of rice shimmer in early sunlight. You sit among potters, weavers, farmers, and monks. The pulse of the Mauryan world, not in palaces or policies, but in its people. The central authority of the empire may be fading, but the rhythms of daily life continue. You travel slowly now, not by decree but by choice. From village to village, across forests and hills, you observe how the people live beneath what remains of Mauryan governance. There is no great collapse, no flaming cities or toppled statues. Instead, there is a gentle loosening. A quiet turning inward, in a farming hamlet near the Ganges. You help a woman carry water from a well. She tells you the old tax official hasn't come in 2 seasons. Another man, she says, came and claimed to represent the emperor, but she's unsure which emperor that is now. They paid him anyway, just in case. Confusion, but not chaos. You find temples still operating, markets still open, children still learning to write their names in the dust with sticks. Buddhist monks still wander, though now fewer in number, and with gentler voices. Jain ascetics pass them on the road, nodding in respect. The religious tolerance cultivated during Ashoka's reign, though no longer mandated, still lingers in the culture. In a town built beside a large stupa, a festival is underway. Candles are lit, flowers are offered. No one speaks of emperors, but everyone speaks of legacy, the teachings of kindness, the stories of Ashoka and his missions, the way things once were. The names of the rulers who followed Ashoka begin to blur. Dasaratha, perhaps his grandson, is said to have preserved some of the monuments. A few inscriptions bear his name, but his influence does not reach far. Historians today know little of these final Mauryan rulers. Some suggest the empire had already fragmented by their time. Others believe they still ruled nominally, while power passed increasingly to local dynasties. The truth is difficult to trace, like a candle burning low in a room where shadows grow taller. But in these quiet places, where life is not measured in edicts or maps, the memory of the Mauryan age lives on differently. You sit with an elderly teacher beneath a fig tree. He shows you palm leaf manuscripts copied by his students, not laws, but parables, stories of the Buddha, fables of kings who gave up their thrones, tales of travellers and trees and acts of simple generosity. He smiles when you ask if they're true. They're remembered, he says. And that's what matters. The imperial army, once vast and disciplined, is now scattered. Some soldiers have returned to farming, others have taken up trade. You meet one former officer who now trains oxen for cart pulling. He still wears a fragment of his old uniform as a belt. Still useful, he says with a laugh. In the south, where Mauryan control had always been softer, new powers begin to rise. The Satavahanas, local kings, merchant guilds. The machinery of empire slowly yields to the machinery of culture, of commerce, of regional rule. But the roads remain. You walk the grand trunk road once more, now overgrown in parts, but still firm beneath your feet. Trees line its edges, some planted in Ashoka's time. Travellers greet one another with familiarity. You share a fire one night with a caravan leader who recites a saying passed down from her grandmother where the pillar stands. Shade follows. She doesn't know who built it, but she's grateful for its presence. That night, you sleep under an open sky, beside a half-fallen milestone carved with faint Brahmi script. The fire crackles low. A dog barks once in the distance, then settles. The stars shimmer above, eternal and untroubled, and you understand now, even in the fading, something endures, not the empire, but the idea that a people could be governed not only by sword and tax, but by dharma, by compassion, fairness, reflection, and here, under the quiet sky, that idea sleeps beside you. You awaken to a different tone in the wind, sharper, quicker, filled with the rustle of armor. You are in the capital again, but it feels changed, not just older, leaner. The palace of Pataliputra still stands, its halls echoing with the memory of golden days. But the confidence that once filled them has thinned to formality. A new ruler sits upon the throne, Brihadratha, the last of the Mauryan line. He is not a tyrant, nor is he a visionary. His presence is quiet, dutiful. He maintains what remains of the imperial order, preserving its form, if not its former power. You see him receiving envoys, signing decrees, reviewing reports, all with a faint weariness, as though he knows the sand beneath his feet has already begun to shift. The court has grown more ceremonial than central, ministers argue, not over policy, but precedence. Governors act increasingly on their own initiative. Military discipline softens, and among the ranks of soldiers, one man stands taller than the rest, Pushyamitra, commander of the imperial army. You meet him one morning during a military drill outside the capital. His movements are precise, his voice firm. The soldiers, once sluggish, straighten at his command. You sense the deference in the air, not to the emperor within the palace, but to the general on the field. The dynamic is unmistakable. Pushyamitra is a man of conviction, trained, ambitious, loyal, but only to stability, to strength. In him, you see the roots of a new order already coiling through the decaying trunk of the old, and soon it happens. Not in blood and spectacle, not with banners and trumpets, but with a quiet execution of intent, according to historical sources. Pushyamitra Shunga, while reviewing troops at a parade, suddenly kills Brihadratha. The emperor dies swiftly, without resistance. The transition is not resisted. It is accepted, expected. The Maurya Empire ends not with a storm, but with a shrug. Some scholars debate the details. Was it truly a coup? Was it sanctioned? Was Brihadratha already seen as irrelevant? The answers, like so much in ancient memory, are shaped by the silence that follows. What is clear is this: with Brihadratha's fall, the Mauryan dynasty ends, and the Shunga dynasty begins. Pushyamitra assumes power. The administration is purged, the court reoriented, Buddhist influence wanes. Temples once sponsored by Ashoka fall into disrepair or are repurposed for Vedic rituals. In some regions, edicts are defaced or simply ignored. But even Pushyamitra, for all his strength, cannot rule an empire of Ashoka's size. The Mauryan world begins to fragment rapidly. Regional powers rise, some sympathetic to Buddhism, others not. The land breaks apart into smaller kingdoms, each holding a sliver of the past. And yet, in this fading light, you notice something remarkable. Ordinary people continue much as before. You return to a village where you once watched children play near an Ashokan pillar. They are older now, But the pillar still stands, its message still read. The locals call it the Peace Stone. They do not care who rules in Pataliputra. They follow the seasons, the rains, the rhythm of planting and prayer in a monastery on the edge of the forest. Monks chant the same sutras Ashoka once supported. They light lamps for him still. In their stories, he is not a former king, he is a moral ancestor, one who showed what a king could be. You walk through markets where traders quote prices in the old coinage. In schools, children still learn the Brahmi script, the one used on the pillars and edicts. Even if they do not know its origins, they carry its legacy. The dynasty has ended, but the imprint remains, not in the halls of power, but in the quiet habits of a civilization that remembers. You rest that night in a stone guest house outside the city, once built for imperial envoys. The walls are cracked, the paint has faded, but the stars above it shine exactly as they did when Chandragupta first walked its halls. Empires, you realize, do not vanish. They dissolve into memory, into custom, into the names carved into stone and the ones whispered by firelight. You awaken beside the Ganges once more. The river flows gently in the morning light, as it always has, its surface catching gold from the rising sun. The world around you feels quieter now, as though something vast has passed, and the land is only just beginning to breathe again. The Maurya Empire is gone, not forgotten, but transformed into memory, a presence felt more than seen. You walk slowly through what remains of the imperial cities in Pataliputra. The once bustling streets are still populated, but there is less ceremony, less splendor. Market stalls still rise with the sun. Artisans still hammer bronze and carve wood, but now they serve local rulers, not distant emperors. You find one pillar still standing near the southern gate, one of Ashoka's. Its lion still watches the road, though lichen covers part of its mane. Children chase one another in circles at its base. A monk sits in meditation beside it, motionless, like the stone itself, and it is here that you feel them, the echoes of the Maurya legacy. You hear it in the Sanskrit verses recited by students learning not just Vedic hymns, but logic, ethics, and philosophy, disciplines once encouraged by the state. You see it in the roads, still in use, still guiding travellers between great rivers and cities. You see it in coins that still bear the faint imprint of Ashoka's wheel. In the countryside, you hear stories passed down like heirlooms, tales of the mighty Chandragupta, who came from nothing to unite the land, of Chanakya, the clever Brahmin who shaped history with strategy and silk, of Ashoka, the king who turned away from conquest to carve kindness into stone. Each story slightly altered, perhaps with the turning of generations. But the core remains. Historians now look back with a blend of admiration and inquiry. Some argue the Mauryan system was too centralized, a structure that could not survive the loss of strong leadership. Others suggest that the empire was a necessary experiment, the first true model of pan-Indian unity, a scaffold upon which future kingdoms would build. And though the empire ended, its memory would shape everything that followed. Centuries later, Gupta emperors would look to the Mauryans as the gold standard of imperial rule. Ashoka's pillars would inspire emperors from distant lands to consider the weight of their own power. Buddhist monks travelling across Asia would carry not only sutras, but stories of Ashoka's transformation. In China, in Japan, in Southeast Asia, he would be remembered not as a conqueror, but as a model king. Even in modern India, the symbol of the lion capital of Sarnath, an Ashokan creation, would become the national emblem. His chakra, the wheel of Dharma, would be placed at the center of the Indian flag. A gentle nod across millennia. You journey north into the hills near Lumbini, where the Buddha was born. Along forest paths and quiet monasteries, Ashoka's influence is felt like an old scent, faded, yet still present in the air. You come across a small shrine where pilgrims leave garlands and coins. One old man tells his grandson, this was the emperor who saw the sorrow of war and became wise. The boy listens, wide-eyed, and so the empire lives on, not in armies, not in borders, but in memory, in wisdom, in quiet acts of compassion. You return once more to the banks of the Ganges. The water is cool. You sit under a tree, its trunk wide and ancient. A heron stands silently in the shallows. The wind moves gently through the reeds. The Maurya Empire, from Chandragupta's ambition to Ashoka's awakening, now belongs to history. But history too is alive, and as you lie back, the grass beneath you soft, you realize you've walked not just through time, but through a story that still flows quietly like the river beside you. You waken beneath the open sky, the Ganges flowing slow and silver beside you. There is no court nearby, no emperor's banner fluttering in the breeze, only the rustle of tall grass and the soft call of birds gliding over the water. But even in this stillness, or perhaps because of it, you feel the presence of everything that came before. This is where the story began, and this is where it gently ends. You walk slowly along the riverbank, your feet pressing into the same soil that once felt the weight of Chandragupta's sandals. Chanakya's stride, Ashoka's bare steps in meditation. Their names no longer stir court bells or summon armies, but their traces remain in stones, in stories, in silent shrines weathered by time. Nearby, you come upon an old woman spinning cotton by hand. She hums a tune you faintly recognize, a lullaby once whispered in a court nursery, now part of a village child's dream. She doesn't speak of emperors, but when you ask about the past, she says simply, the land remembers. And it does. The empire that once stretched from the mountains of Afghanistan to the jungles of Tamilakam is no more, but its idea, unity across difference, governance with principle, morality beside power, has seeped into the bedrock of a civilization. You pass a cluster of travellers resting beneath a tamarind tree. They speak of local kings, market prices, the condition of the roads, many of which were first laid in Mauryan times. One man carries a bronze coin with the faint wheel of Ashoka stamped upon it. He does not know the emperor's story, but he trusts the coin. History lives like that, quietly, within things we carry without knowing. You stop at a clearing where a single pillar still stands, weathered, leaning slightly, but intact. Its inscription is almost gone. Moss fills its grooves, but in the right light, at the right angle, you can still see Ashoka's words, "May all beings live in peace." You place your hand on the stone. It is cool, solid, timeless, and as the breeze brushes past, you feel it, the echoes of an age long faded, but never lost, the whispers of a boy who dreamed of empire, of a scholar who shaped nations with thought, of a warrior who renounced violence and became a teacher to the world. These were the Mauryas, not gods, not myths, just people, like you, moving through time, trying to make something better, something lasting, something kind. And now, dear listener, it is time to rest. You've walked a long path tonight, through dust and stone, scroll and silence. You've stood beneath palace eaves, watched the sun rise over monastery roofs, listened to river water lap gently beside ancient cities. You've seen how an empire rises not from ambition alone, but from intention, and how its heart endures not in crowns, but in memory, in the stories told quietly by firelight, in the way roads are still walked, in how justice is still whispered into the wind. Close your eyes now. Feel the earth beneath you, this same earth that once bore the weight of war elephants, the same earth where monks bowed in meditation. Feel it cradle you, softly, like history holding its breath. The stars above have watched you every step. They watch the Morias too, in their youth, their triumphs, their questions, their decline, and now they watch over you. Let your breath grow slower. Let the river of time carry you gently. No need to remember every name, every date, every moment. Just carry the feeling that history is not far away. It is beneath your feet. It is in your breath. It is in the quiet act of listening, of learning, of caring. Good night, dear traveller of time, and sweet dreams.